Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. And this episode kicks off the SC300 build series. This is one that I am very excited about, as this car, the same as pretty much the rest of the projects that are around here, has a bunch of sentimental value, and it really deserves a new lease on life and to be loved the way that it should have been for all of these years. So I've had this car on the channel a couple of times in the past, but never really featured it in depth. It was always kind of a side project, but now it will be the focal point for a little while. So what this car is my 1992 Lexus SC300. And if you guys don't know a whole lot about these cars, they share a whole lot of chassis infrastructure with the Mark IV Supra. So it uses the same coilovers, and there's a number of other components that are applicable between both of these cars. And I think that's kind of cool. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, or the poor man's Supra. No offense intended or anything like that with that statement, but it's just a really cool car, and you can get kind of all of the enjoyment that you would out of a Mark IV Supra without all of the unwanted attention. So this car in this setup, this is a built 2JZ GE, so GE cylinder head. It is a steel rod, I believe it's a 10-to-1 piston, factory crank, factory mains, pretty basic setup. This is an On3 Performance 6765, so their version of a 6766. And it has a hastily assembled intake manifold that I built for it in quick order, in short order, a few years ago. It has a pretty wild tube header that I built for it, and a nice 3.5-inch thick Bell Intercoolers Cord aluminum intercooler. The car recently went on a Haltech Elite 2500, and at this point in time, it's time to do a refresh and rebirth of this car. So this car has gone through a number of different iterations and turbo setups over the years. And this was my original drag car project, or what I thought was going to be when I was young and didn't know any better. So it's had everything from a Chinese excess power 70mm turbo kit to a big T6 turbo setup on it, to a few smaller turbo setups. And now I think, since this car is now the big turbo crazy drag car setup, there isn't really much of a need to have two cars like that. So that is where this SC300 will fill the void in between the nice resto mod that the Mark II is and kind of the crazy race car setup that the Mark IV is. So let's take a moment and go through some old photos and maybe some videos, if I have them, of the old setups that the car has been on, and then we'll talk about what is to come in this build series. So the same as all of the other projects that I have shown on the channel, all of my personal projects, that is, I don't get rid of things. So rather than constantly cycling through different projects, I keep the same projects for many, many years. And you end up with a bunch of cool iterations like you guys just saw. So what are we going to do with this car now? Obviously it looks pretty complete aside from some intercooler tubing and a good thorough cleaning, but we have one big issue that I need to address. And if you guys see down in this area, this pocket in through here is where the alternator plug, which is this guy right here, needs to go into. And as I built this header, I did not allow enough clearance between the backside of the alternator and this primary tube right here to be able to clip the alternator plug into place. Now I could go to a one wire, like a self-exciting alternator, but in my mind that doesn't really solve the problem. You just end up kind of band-aiding it with a different alternator as opposed to building a header for it that will accommodate the factory alternator location, plug location, and all of that. So the first order of business for this will be to build a new header. Now this header that's on it right now is a mild steel head flange, which you guys may be able to see with kind of the rust and corrosion on it. And it's 304 stainless tubing. And I was all excited about this as this was the first tube header that I had built. And this header dates even before the Inconel header that is on the Mark IV. But as cool as the header is, I think the primary sizes are way too large for what I want to do with this car. You don't need giant primaries when you are trying to build a more responsive street setup. And obviously the big consideration, the big problem is not being able to hook the alternator up. As I've been moving this car in and out of the shop, I've been doing so by just hooking the jump pack up to the battery in the trunk and bumping it back and forth that way. And I actually took the car down the road like that just to, even though it wasn't going to be able to make any boost or anything without any intercooler tubes, it still was cool to be able to drive it and experience it a little bit again. But I need to solve the alternator clearance issue. Well, like I said, that will end up equating to a new header for this. And if there's a new header that goes on it, that will end up as new wastegate positions. I'll end up changing up the way that the wastegate dump tubes route, ideally building a recirculated dump tube setup for it, and so on and so forth. You can see that this will quickly end up going down the rabbit hole, which I'm completely all right with, as I have a lot of fun building setups like this. So one thing that I want to do as I build the new hot part setup is fixture the current header, at least as far as the turbine flange and head flange locations are concerned, because of this downpipe. And this is an Inconel downpipe on this car, one that I built out of some extra materials that I had around when I had built the header for the Mark IV. So that downpipe is kind of a special piece that needs to stay with this car, and it can only work, or can only really work, with the flange locations where they are currently. So in order to do that, I need to pull this whole hot side and whole turbo setup apart, so that way I can build the fixture and get everything ready to rock, ready to build the new header. Well, a little bit of disassembly and cleanup later, and the SC no longer has a hot side. It is on the cart right here. So the header, although it looks cool, like I showed earlier, it does not work due to this, I think it's this primary right here, not clearing the alternator plug. But here is the rest of everything that I've pulled off. So we have the turbo itself, we have the downpipe, and we have the wastegates and dump tubes, as well as the header. Now these wastegates, they are fairly salty, but they are Gen 4 Turbo Smart Hypergate 45s. And those will end up being for sale in the garage sale section of my website that's linked in the description below. So I'll offer a really good price on these. If you guys need wastegates for your project, and you don't mind ones that are a little bit rough around the edges, these will be a good option for you. So the next thing I need to get a turbine inlet flange, or actually two of them. Now I have this Precision one right here that I was trying to modify to make it work, but I think that it's a little bit too thick and it isn't going to quite work out the way that I want it to. So I'll go up to on 3 and we'll get a couple of turbine inlet flanges provided they have them in stock. So that way I can modify one to be a female flange to account for the receiver, or a fire ring rather, on the existing turbine flange. And then I'll get a second one so that way I can have it when I actually begin building the new header. Well, I'm ready to knock the fixture out for the SC's new turbo header. And I have the old turbo header here on the bench, as well as a 2JZ GE fixture plate that I had. I think I made that when I built the header on the Mark IV. But I went up to Accelerated yesterday to drop the Mark II off, and Russ was kind enough to turn a couple of pieces for me for this fixture. So right here we have a female side V-band that matches up perfectly to the male V-band that is actually the turbine flange. And I went up to on 3 to get what I thought was going to be a couple of male flanges, and it turns out they actually have the female side to the flange, which makes this process much easier. So this flange, or this fixture plate, I guess, will be clamped down onto the turbine flange, and then I'll have to build a couple of bars going over to it, weld them to this side as well as the head flange side, and then the flange positions will be fixtured and everything should be pretty easy from there. You can get more elaborate with fixtures like this one that I have over here, and this is a customer manifold that I'm in the middle of working on. But you can see that this fixture has all these bolt holes on the bottom, and I have fasteners, or little bolts or screws on the bottom side, where I actually have locating fixtures for the primary merge collectors. So you can go pretty elaborate doing different holding fixtures, things like that. But something like this, where I really am only concerned with keeping the flange locations the same, I don't need anything other than a couple of bars going from the head flange plate over to the turbine flange plate, and it makes it much easier that way. So without further ado, let's get to bending and fitting some bars. We can get those welded in, and then it will be just a matter of building the header, a small task. There we have a completed fixture for the SC's new turbo header. So like I said, this is pretty simple. Just a couple of bent bars coming out to my turbine flange plate. And then the head flange plate. I drill all of the actual fastener holes that hold the head flange to the head flange plate 1/4 inch. As I will use countersunk 1/4 inch fasteners, so that way each time the flange is installed or removed from the fixture, I can verify and guarantee that it goes back in the same spot every single time. Now, I've shown how to do this before. It's pretty self-explanatory. All you really need is a set of transfer punches and a drill or drill press. But the one little note that I wanted to make is you see all of these little holes in the center that pretty much run along the center line of the head flange. Well, the purpose of those are vent holes for argon as I'm back purging this header, or as I will be. So back purging, what you're attempting to do with it, or what you are doing rather, is displacing the atmospheric air from the inside of the piece that you are welding. Reactive metals such as stainless, titanium, Inconel and nickel alloys, so on and so forth. It's very important to get that atmospheric air out from the inside of the piece that you are welding. Just like on the outside of the piece, how we have all these pretty colors and everything that are a direct result of gas coverage compared to heat, the inside of the piece, if it is not also an inert environment or an environment that is free of atmospheric air, it will corrode and oxidize and do all kinds of weird stuff on the inside of the piece. At a worst case, it will look ugly on the inside, not be quite as strong, and or I guess that would be the best case. In the worst case, you can have a piece of that break off and end up making its way into your turbine wheel, which is not a good time. So all of these smaller holes along here, as well as this little brass fitting in the turbine flange plate there, that is all, those are all provisions to set this up as an actual back purge fixture, in addition to being a locating fixture as well. So there's you guys' little tech tip for the day. Always be sure to account for your back purging stuff, as the gas needs somewhere to go. And if you don't have these little vent holes, then you can end up building pressure or gas pressure inside of your piece, having a wall blow out on you, and that is never a good time. Well, with the SC's hot side disassembled and the new header fixture created, I think that will be about the end of this episode. So the next thing that I'll need to do is to actually figure out the materials list for the car's new turbo header. I've done that a few times in the past, and I don't think that I need to do it again on this car. So we will pick up in the next episode, hopefully having materials here for the header, and at that point in time we can start the new build. So I'm really looking forward to that. Should be really cool, and I have some really trick ideas that I want to try to employ onto this header. But that will be then. This is now, and we are finishing up. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all these different journeys throughout all the different projects, and continuing week after week to come here and see what's going on. It warms my heart, and I appreciate you guys very much. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for taking time out of your day to come hang out with me. But with that being said, that will be the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way. Be sure to check out my 15th anniversary commemorative shirts and hoodies. Those are linked in the description below. And without any more being said, I will see you guys in the next episode.